So let's go back to our app directory, which is the most important one. In this, we have a build folder, and this contains a build folder for specified build variants stored in the main application module. So it will have all your main application modules build files. Next is the library. So this contains private libraries stored in the main application module. Right now I've not added anything, so it's empty, but in future when we add something, we'll see some stuff inside this. Next we have source. Source contains your activity file, the file that we created, which will be stored in think source main Java, and there you go, that's our main activity file which is there. We close all these first, close all, just open main.activity. So this is your main activity file, the main first page of your file. That's what is saved inside the source folder. Other than that, they also have some, I have an Android test folder which contains the instrumentation test for like testing your application, for writing unit tests. You can use this particular folder, and we'll not talk about it right now, but we'll talk in future about testing. And also we have Java file, Java folder, which contains a Java source which we saw. We have a resources folder which has all the resources. Let me get back to that in a minute. And our test is example unit test. If you want to write unit test, you'll find your test cases here. Next thing that I want to talk about is, let's go back to resources folder. Now inside resources we have a bunch of different folders. As you can see, there's drawable, layout files, map, values, and then there is Android manifest, which is outside resources. Let me talk about Android manifest first before going over resources file. So Android manifest, this is the control file that describes the nature of the application and each of its components. For instance, it described certain qualities about the activities, services, intent receivers, and content providers, which I briefly mentioned in the previous videos. What permissions are requested, if you need internet permissions, if you need Bluetooth permissions, so that is something that you'll add here. What external libraries are needed, what device features are required, what API levels are supported or required, and others. So this is pretty much the main manifest, or as I would say, the guy who actually should know about everything that happens inside your application. If there is an activity or a service, you'll have to specify it here. Without manifest knowing it, your application will crash if you start to open another activity, or if you're trying to do something else, which we'll look at more details later. Now let's go back to the resource folder. Now resource folder has a drawable folder where you can add all your images you have, and for all the different types, like you would want to support different resolution, HDPI, MDPI, XHDPI. We can create multiple files, and I'm going to talk about them later. Another one is the layout file. So this is another important file which I mentioned, which was created in the start. This layout file is actually it's saying missing something right now. I think it's, let me go back to a previous version and see if it renders the screen. But currently what it has is just a text view, as you can see here, inside a relative layout, and we'll talk about this in more detail later. But what it does is it takes the screen, adds it to the main manifest, and displays as your first screen. I also have map here. Now this image that we have will be used for, or IC launcher is used for as the first as the icon for your application. So when you install the app, you see this, and there are a bunch of different one. As I mentioned, for different resolution there's different folders, and they would actually pick, your Android device is responsible to pick which file to display for which device, so you don't have to worry about it. Just add the images here and they'll automatically be used. And I'm going to show you how to create your own images if you don't have any graphic designer. I'm going to show you some shortcuts later on. Other than that, I have a values folder which has colors. So if you want to define some custom colors, let's open up. There are some colors that are already defined, so I have some colors defined here. Some dimensions file, this will have all your dimensions that you want to display. It's a good practice to keep everything in these files instead of defining again and again, so you have one place defined and it can be used everywhere just by using some shortcuts which I'll show you later. Dimensions, you have your string files if you want to use different strings. It also helps in localization, which I'll show you later. And then we have a styles which uses pretty much like displaying your a particular theme that you want to use in throughout your application, so you can set it here and use it everywhere. There's also values W820dp for higher resolutions, so if you want to set something for higher resolution screens, you can actually set up here. So these are some of the files that come pre-installed. There are other files like there are inside layout like menu files which are used for menu specific page, and we have a video just for menus later on. There's a raw folder where we'll be saving things like mp3 files or mp4 files for the videos and audios, and I'm going to show you more in detail for one of the class, one of the videos. Then we have values which we spoke about. We'll also have XML folder and animation folder for XML specific files, and then animation for creating anim folder for having animation folders. And for drawable, again we have you can create 4 or 5 different folders as in how you want it: mdpi, hdpi, xhdpi, xxhdpi, xxhdpi, depending on the resolution of the screen. So these are the files that we have right now in our project, and below it, inside the app folder, other than this, I have a git ignore which is specifies the untracked file against for the git. And then I have app.iml. This is IntelliJ idea file only for this particular module. You can have a bunch of different modules added to the same project. Then I have build.gradle, which is for more like customizing the settings for your, like, what minimum SDK should I use, what is the target SDK version. Version code and version names are more like every time you make a new version, you'll have to increment this to 1 2 3 4, something like that. And then version name is what users probably sees, you can have it as 1.0.0 or zero point 0.1, or if you're having a alpha release or beta release, you can start with 0.1, and when you are sure about releasing it, you can, if every time you change something, it will ask you to sync Gradle. Now let's go back to activity main and see what happened. Let me restart this and see if it opens up. Sometimes restarting Eclipse Android Studio helps fix this problem. So I'm just gonna go back to Android Studio. Let's start Android Studio one more time, and let's see if our activity file worked properly or not. Now there was one more file at the bottom of the project which was called as proguard rules.pro. Now proguard is a settings file right here. This is this shrinks, optimizes, and kind of optimizes your code by removing unused code and renaming classes, fields, and method which semantically obscures names. The result is smaller size APK that is more difficult to reverse engineer, because ProGuard makes your application harder to reverse engineer. It is important that you use it when your application utilizes features that are sensitive to security, like when you're licensing your application. So ProGuard is integrated into Android build system, so you do not have to invoke it manually. ProGuard runs only when when you build your application release mode, so you do not have to deal with of like kind of encrypted code when you build your application in debug mode. Having ProGuard run is completely optional but highly recommended when you're building production support apps. So let's go back, close everything, all the files that I opened, and let's go back to our main folder, resources, and inside layout, open this, and there you go. That's what you should see. If I run this application, all you have to do is press this play button on the top, and this will run in your, as soon as I run it. Let's see, I'll probably have to open my Genymotion, and let's start up Genymotion. Once it starts up, what I can do is I can just run this app. It's actually building. First time whenever an application is building, it might take some time, so you'll have to wait for a little while, and once it built, it will ask you, do you want to run it in this particular emulator. Now I showed you how to install emulators in the previous video. I hope you have them, or you can use the Android virtual device that came with Studio, so this will launch, but it takes a lot of time, and that's why we install Genymotion. Now I can say use same device for future launches. Let me see. Okay, our emulator is ready. Let's run it and let's see if it works. So it's going to take a couple of seconds before it runs. It will actually install the application icon that we had and then install the app in there. Let's see, there was some problem. Maybe let me run it one more time and see if it opens up. See, play. No recent apps, so you can play around with your emulator and see what all things you can do. You can set the GPS, set the camera, you can look at the battery, increase the volume, reduce the volume, change the orientation, and we'll play more about it later. Let's see what's the problem here. So okay, finally it's doing something now, and there you go, our first application is running on the emulator. So this is how you create a simple application with nothing inside it, and it will add all these details. If you want to add some more stuff to it, like from the left side inside the XML, you can keep on drag and dropping it inside your layout file, and you can see all these options here. It's using a relative layout as the parent. If you click on the text here, you'll see a relative layout on the top, and you can also look up on from the right side where the component tree is there, that's using a relative layout and all the items inside it. When I say relative layout, that means every item that you add, as you can see the arrows here in the guides, it will make that item relative to other objects. So that's what a relative layout is, and we'll talk about layouts in more detail later. As soon as I do that, and if I run this application now, you'll see all those items that I've added here display on your screen, and they're completely functional, but nothing happens because I've not given any actions. So that's how you build your first application. Go give it a try, and then we'll talk more about activities and linear layouts and things in the next video. Thank you.